All right, let's go for it. Let's update to 1.21.3. All right, welcome back to everyone's war, and in this tutorial, we'll be updating our Forge project over here to 1.21.3. There are a couple of disclaimers at the very beginning. Number one, I still highly recommend you stick with 1.21.1 as it is the de facto modding version for this particular major version, and it most likely won't change until 1.22 comes out. Number two, as you get further along, meaning 1.21.4 and 0.5, Forge has barely any documentation left to help you update, which is the reason why we're going to stick with the 1.21.3 update, and then we're going to basically finish it right here for the time being. If there is anyone who knows any documentation whatsoever, specifically for 1.21.4 Forge data gen and how that works, please feel free to leave something in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure. But that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to update this to 1.21.3. So we're going to go to our Gradle.properties file and change this to 1.21.3. And the Forge version here is going to be 53.1.1. Absolutely fantastic. I'm going to add this right here. There you go. The parchment mappings are going to be 2024 December, so 12/07 1.21.3. And we also want to go to our build.gradle file because, well, we have to comment out JEI right here because JEI does not exist for 1.21.3. So yeah, that's basically going to be that, and that means that we will actually just have to deal with that. I believe that should be everything we need, so we can load the Gradle changes. You can also open the Gradle tab over here, reload all Gradle projects. Either one works fine, and of course it's going to rebuild everything, download everything again, and things of that nature. And this can take anywhere from a couple of seconds to a minute or so, depending on all sorts of different factors. So let's just let this run through, and once it is done, we can proceed from there. Here we go, build successful in 22 seconds. And first of all, in the compat folder, because we no longer have access to JEI's API, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the compat folder. You can also just take it and move it out of your project. That would also work, but I'm just going to choose to delete it because we no longer need this for the time being. Next point is to basically go through every single class. So I'm going to go start at the top, and we're going to go through every single class just to make sure everything works. Spawn type has changed to entity spawn reason. That is now a new name. And if there are any imports that are missing or are wrong, basically here, Alt, Control, and O to delete all of the imports that no longer exist. Awesome. And we can basically go through everything here individually. This is now the item interaction result instead of the, only the interaction result, not item interaction result. And we only have a success sort of Boolean over here, no longer, or an enum rather, no longer a method. And here, same thing, Control Alt O, and there we go. And we can basically go through everything. The same thing here. This is now just a success right here in this case. Kohlrabi crop block is fine. Magic block is fine. Flammable rotated pillar block, the sapling, and the pedestal has the same thing. Item interaction result is now the interaction result, and we simply change this in all of the different ways, and there we have it. And of course, Control Alt O, and all of the custom block classes are already done. We're cruising through. The block entity, anything? Well, there is one thing at the bottom over here, which is the recipe manager. This has changed. We want to cast the level right here to a server level, and then we want to call recipe access. This is going to also give us the recipe manager. However, we can't do this because the getCurrentRecipe method will only ever be called on the server. We know this because the custom block over here in the growth chamber recipe, we are basically filtering out the client. So this is a server call for the tick method, and that's the only time recipes are called. We don't need to do anything for the pedestal block entity, and then the renderer, I believe, works as well. However, here in the block entity, we now are actually going to make a new block entity type. However, I do have to double check how exactly, of course, with a supplier. So this is a supplier of a new block entity type, and then this build here is gone. And what we need to do here is something else. Yes, this is no longer just a block. This is a set.of blocks, because basically you can add multiple different types of blocks to a block entity type. I'm unsure where this is exactly used or why this is the case, but whatever the case may be, we just have to do that. So that is how we're going to do it. So this is a set.of, and there you go. That's going to be okay, and that's okay. As per usual, of course, all of the code is also available to you down below, and that will hopefully help as well. I'll also link the NeoForge documentation for this because, like I said, there's no primer or no like update guide for specifically Forge. However, the NeoForge one will work for most things. You will have to adapt it a little bit, I believe. However, it's still it's better than nothing, basically. That's the idea. And then we go on to the modblocks class. Now, you might say, well, there is no changes because there's no error. That's not how modding works, okay? Just because there's no error doesn't mean there's no changes. The change is quite significant. You may or may not have seen this before. Every single block and every single item now needs on the properties the set ID call. Now, we're not going to do this inline. However, I want to show you this one time over here. In theory, for every block, we need to do set ID and then resource key.create registries.block resource location from namespace and path to toolmod.modID, and then passing in the same name that we have here, so growth_chamber, which is, in my opinion, lots of words that I could describe this as, but none of them are okay for me to say. Basically, this is just stupid, okay? I don't know why they did this. There probably is a very good reason for it. Who knows? But I just don't understand it because, in theory, when we're registering our blocks, every single thing of this, it already knows. It knows it's registering a block. It knows that it's on my mod ID, and it knows the name right here. So I don't know why it needs it again, but okay, sure, fine. If you want to do it like this, then you do it like this. And to do this, we are going to change the block item in the block, the register block item in the register block method to the following. I'm just going to copy both of those over as it makes it just a little bit easier. But the basic idea is simply we now have a function from block behavior properties to a block over here, and we're going to use that in all of our different calls. And then basically inside of the register block call, we're going to apply this function, add the specific set ID, and that's it. That's the idea. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. This is going to do it though, and this is going to work. And what we now need to do is we need to go up here to the arrow. Basically, we want to select the arrow, press Ctrl R, and we're going to replace it with the following. We're going to replace it with properties and then the arrow right here, and we're going to replace them individually because the last one, I'm pretty sure, or like a couple of them, we should not replace, mainly this one. So basically one of the last ones, this one we should also not replace, but there you go. That should be fine. And there are two errors for the crop block as well as this one. Those ones, no, we do actually have to change this. So basically what we're going to do here for the kohlrabi crop block, it's going to look like this. Basically, we're going to have the properties because we no longer can copy them from the wheat, and we also can no longer copy them from the berry bush. So we're just going to do this. Highly recommended to just go into the GitHub repository and take a look at this. Basically, I've taken the same block properties from wheat and just copied them over, and then also, of course, have added the set ID over here. Those calls are super important. Do not forget the set ID call on the crop blocks. That is very, very important. And then let's go to the very tippy top and let's see how this looks. Well, for a normal block, in this case Alexandrite, what we can simply do is we're going to replace the block behavior properties.of, and we're going to replace this with properties. We want to do this for almost all of them except for the last one again. So we're going to do this manually, or like one after the other again, because this one is fine, this one is fine, and then this one we do not want to replace, very importantly. And then here we actually have two which we also did not want to replace. That's okay. Those are literally the ones that I've just added here for the kohlrabi crop block and the honeyberry bush. But that's okay, and the rest is fine. So now the normal blocks here work. Those are all great, and they will simply work. The reason why they now will work is because we've added this properties over here, and basically at the end of the process, then we're going to set the ID to the exact same thing that I've basically said before. So that's going to basically deal with all of this. The only times this does not work is when we have a full copy of, right, or full copy, which we have 7 of. I believe only starting with the logs. And for this, I have done the same thing that I've done for all of the rest, and that is I've copied over everything from the logs. So Control left click on this. We're going to go into the blocks class, and what we'll find here is we can literally just take whatever the properties are from the log properties right here. I've basically already prepared this. I highly recommend, once again, you go into the description below, into the GitHub repository, and just check it out here. You can see these are all still mod flammable rotated pillar blocks, then properties, and then we're doing all the craziness that we have from our logs. And however, we are using the properties over here that we're supplying with this. Similar thing here, although this one is literally just going to be properties because there's literally no properties for planks that we really need to add. And then in the leaves, we have a similar thing, which is going to look kind of like this, where we're going to have map color of map and strength and things like that. Totally fine. Finally, the sapling is going to be a similar type of thing as well. It's going to look kind of like this. However, we did want to make the mod sapling block over here, and we're just going to add that back. This is going to be endstone, if I recall correctly, which we had this on. This is blocks.endstone. There you go. Phenomenal. And sometimes when you only have properties, you can also hover over this and literally just replace it with the block and then : new. That would also work. Either one is fine. But yeah, that's going to be that. And that's already quite a big change. And yes, we will have to do the same thing for the items again, but we're going to go through the items a little bit faster when we get there. First of all, getting through everything else. Data components, that's okay. Here, the recipe provider has changed a little bit. And I believe in terms of the rest, there's a couple of things over here. The log blocks, I actually do have to check this myself because I'm not 100% sure what it's changed here. It's because they have to be cast to rotated pillar blocks, I believe. Yes, the reason is because we are now blocks over here. What I'm going to do is we're just going to go to mod blocks again and change this to registry objects of type rotated pillar block over here. And that's going to fix the error. That's going to be making it a little bit easier, because why make our lives harder? They don't need to be. This error for the trim materials comes because the trim materials don't work right now, but we will fix this when we get to the trim materials. So that's going to be fine. In the items, these trim materials have just changed their location, so we can simply basically delete all of the imports and re-import everything. Boop, boop, and boop, and that's going to be fine. One more change in the trimmed armor item generation over here. I've fixed this, because right now the equipment slot needs an item stack, which obviously we don't have, and that's going to be, well, an issue. So I've just done this. This is not good code. It will work, but it's not nice, okay? This is really kind of stupid to like basically literally just get the armor item and say, hey, does it contain a helmet? Then the armor type is a helmet, and then we just continue. It's not very well done, but it's going to get us through this, and I think that that's okay. I don't even know if we want to keep the shout out over here because I've changed this quite a bit, but we're going to be fine, okay? We're going to be okay. Next up is the tag, fine, and then the recipes. Like I said, the recipes has changed. I wouldn't say significantly, but a little bit. First of all, the constructor has now the holder lookup.provider. This is going to be the provider, and then a recipe output. I'm going to call this the recipe output, passing in exactly those two things, the provider as well as the recipe output. Is going to do wonders. And then finally, we also want a runner. This is a static class. Like I said, this is the runner class for recipe provider.runner. And it basically deals with all of the rest over here. The build recipes no longer has any recipe output here. And now you might ask, oh no, what are we going to do here? We're going to replace p recipe output with simply output. And we're going to do this all of the time except for in the, okay, actually we could have done it all the time, that's fine. We still have errors. Those errors are in the slab, the pressure plate, the wall, and the trim smithing. We simply delete the output from the slab, the pressure plate, the wall method, as well as, I'm pretty sure, the trim as well, although the trim also needs something else, and that's going to be a resource key. No, a resource key of type resource key, maybe? Yes, thank you, create. For the registries.recipe, and then the resource location is already here, so we can simply do that. Awesome. And now the shapeless stuff, well, we just remove the class and we just call the shaped and shapeless methods like this, and that's going to be fine. Last but not least, we want to make all of these ones non-static, and that is going to fix the last issue as well. And that will do that. Now that we have this, we can go back to our data generators class. And instead of a new mod recipe provider, we now have a new mod recipe provider.runner. and everything works totally fine. Awesome. That is data gen. Like I said, the data pack entries here, we are going to be able to fix that as soon as we fix the trims. In the slimy effect, we now have a server level right here. This is the server level. Nope, not a server, but a server level. I'm going to call this the server level, and we're of course going to pass this into the super call, not to worry. In enchantments, I believe only this one, entity spawn reason instead of the spawn type. That's okay, that's okay. Anything else here? I believe not. Nope, it is indeed not the case. And then, haha, we get to the entities. Oh my. Well, entities have changed in their entirety. Well, not quite, but a little bit. So in entity renderer and an entity model, now both rely on what is called a render state. The render state basically has things from the entity class that it passes into this render state, and then the model/renderer can use that. Why is that done? I have no idea. Is this a good idea? I don't think so, but that's what we're going to do. So the entity renderer of type share entity of type entity render state. There we go. The texture location no longer exists, and now we're actually going to call the create render state method, where we'll create a new entity render state. Entity render state. Awesome. No errors present, and we can continue with the Tomahawk. Sadly, the Tomahawk will have some limitations that we will need to deal with, but that's going to be okay. This extends entity model of type entity render state. In this case, inside of the constructor, we're going to call super, passing in the root. We then no longer need the render to buffer even. And actually the setup anim we also no longer need. So there you go. That's the Tomahawk model. The renderer, a little more complicated. This is now the entity renderer of type Tomahawk projectile entity of type entity render state. There we go. The render method now no longer takes in an entity, but actually only the entity render state. This is going to be the state, and it also doesn't need the float of the entity yaw and the partial ticks, because those are also part of the render state. So there you go. That's going to be fixing that issue. Similarly, the texture location, I think that also takes in the render state actually, right? I'm pretty sure. It does not. Well, we're just going to basically change this to nothing and just not have this overwritten. That's going to be fine. And that's going to be okay. The only issue here is now that we also need to create the render state. So once again, create render state, where we're going to create a new entity render state. Awesome. And in the render method itself, well, we no longer have access to the entity, whether or not it's grounded, and we can't really do anything here. So we're just going to delete that. So sadly, the actual Tomahawk will no longer rotate. It is what it is. Here, get foil buffer. Here, remove this. And then here, instead of these three, we're passing the state, and that's it. Highly recommended to also go down to the GitHub repository down below, as this makes it a little bit easier to follow everything. Finally, in the Triceratops model, we now have an entity model over here, entity model of type Triceratops. What? A render state. Oh my, Triceratops render state. Of course, this doesn't exist. I am well aware of this, which is why I'm going to hover over this, create class. Over here, there we go. This is the Triceratops render state, which will extend from the living entity render state, and it's going to have two fields. Those two fields are as follows: the idle animation as well as the variant, the Triceratops variant. Exciting, yes. Then in the Triceratops model constructor, once again, a super call passing root, and then down here, we no longer need the root method. The render to buffer method we also no longer need. And then here, instead of the instead of all of them, right? I think all of them get deleted. Actually, yes. This is now the Triceratops render state, and we're going to call this state. Unbelievable. Passing in here is going to be the head rotation, render state.yrot, state.xrot, and then the limb swing amount, or the limb swing, sorry, is the walk anim pos. This is the walk anim speed, and then this is going to be state.idle animation, and here in the age ticks is state.age and ticks. So everything now works via the render state. I'm still not 100% sure if I like this change or not. I probably don't, but it's going to be fine. And in the renderer, we continue to do crazy things, and the crazy things we do is now the Triceratops renderer extends from mob renderer of type Triceratops entity, comma, of type Triceratops model of type Triceratops. Wait a second. No, this is fine. I just need a second one, which is going to be the Triceratops render state right here. Triceratops render state. There you go. Oh, it's not correct. Oh, no, it is correct. It is correct. I just need the methods. So the methods changed. The render method now takes in the state like this. There you go. That's going to be awesome. And you will not believe it, but yes, you will believe it because the isBaby is now a field in the render state, so not to worry. We can still ask if it's a baby, and we simply are going to change it like this. The texture location, that also still works with the state, absolutely, so we can get the variant via the variant pole over here of the field. However, there's two more things we need. One thing is to create the render state, this time a Triceratops render state, oh my. But then the next question is, you might ask, okay, this render state stuff, it's all fine and well, but like, how do we assign values? Because right now, we're literally just creating a new one with empty values. There's nothing in here. Exactly. Because that happens when we extract the render state right here. And what we do is we call reused state, p reused state dot idle animation state dot copy from entity dot idle animation. So this is p entity dot idle animation state, and then p reused state dot variant is equal to entity dot get variant, or p entity dot get variant. Yeah. And we still need both of them on the entity as well. So I don't know why this exists. There's probably a reason for it. Regardless, that's fine. In the entities, the chair needs another method hurt server. That's fine. And then down here, I'm just going to copy this over. This is very trivial. Literally, if we're not client side, then we can call this at kill because it needs a server level. Very, very straightforward, nothing too crazy. So then we have the Tomahawk projectile entity where isGround is no longer accessible. So we're going to delete it, and that is that. And finally, the Triceratops entity needs two things. Number one, this one needs an entity spawn reason now, which is of course here breeding in this case for the breed offspring. And then down here, it is the entity spawn reason as well. Awesome, nothing to worry about. And finally, I believe I can fly. We need to add the attributes of tempt range because this has the tempt goal. And if we don't add this, then we're going to actually crash the game. Very important to also add. Finally, I think actually, yes, finally, we have the registration of the entities, and those are now done with resource keys as well. I will simply copy them over. You have seen making resource keys a couple of times before. So instead of the simple string, we now pass in the key over here into the build method. And that's pretty much it. Nothing to worry about, nothing crazy. Literally just going to be the same name as the name that we're registering this entity with. And there you go. Continuing along, I believe these are all fine except for this one, which is the display client message with a second parameter, which is the action bar, a boolean, which is simply going to say false, and that's going to be that. Next one, items. Let's first of all go through the custom items. Luckily, we're doing pretty well over here. Oh boy, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. Well, I spoke too soon. Of course I did. Well, not quite. The hammer now is no longer a tier right here. This is a tool material. And the properties is fine. However, it actually wants a couple more things. And these couple more things is a float, and that's going to be the P attack damage and the float P attack speed. And we need to pass both of those in after, in this order, the mineable with pickaxe tag over here. Control-Alt-O to delete the imports, and there you go. Then the armor, the one that we've literally just changed, we're going to change again because now it is no longer a holder of armor material. Can you guess what it is? Yes, of course, it is now going to be, exactly, not a holder of armor material, but simply an armor material, because of course it is. I'm going to replace all of those and re-import the armor material class because that has changed its location. There we go. And the type is now an armor type. Awesome. That's nothing to worry about. This does not work because it's a custom armor material. We're going to fix it in just a second. Down here, we no longer can get the material. So we now need to get this via an equipment data component. However, I do believe this does not actually work properly. However, I believe it does not work. You might have to double check this again if there's a different way to check the models and stuff like that. I highly recommend it you do so, because I do believe there might be an issue here that I was unable to fix so far. Continuing along, Tomahawk item here is now also just an interaction result. There's no more holder, there's no more of any type. And then here, this is also just success. Boom, boom, boom. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Mod armor materials, we're going to copy this over because luckily it is one of those things that has gotten significantly easier, as you can see. Yeah. The only thing we need to add is here the field inside of the tag keys or the tags. We're going to create that key for Alexandrite underscore repairables. Repairables. Yes, there you go. And we're going to immediately just make sure that that is data gen as well. The reason why we have this obviously is that tag is going to allow us to specify what type of things we're going to be able to repair our armor with. In this case, an Alexandrite, obviously. That's going to be okay. That's fine. That's fine. That now works. That now works. And we can continue with create demo tabs. Nothing. Food properties. Yes, of course. So the food properties, I'll actually copy over the contents over here, and then I'll explain. So the effects no longer happen in the food property builder. They now work with a consumable over here. Consumable is an interface. It's actually really neat because basically on consume, you can now add almost any effect. And in theory, you can simply add a custom consume effect that you can then apply when a certain food is consumed, which is really awesome because it basically allows you to do almost anything when a food is consumed. I think that's pretty freaking cool, actually. Mod items, well, there's a couple of things that have changed. First of all, let's do the visible stuff, and then we'll do the, let's think about this. Yes, let's do the visible stuff first. No, let's do the properties first. For the properties, we now want to, well, kind of do exactly the same that we've done before, and that is actually make a helper method. Because we now need to make this method so that the function also happens right here. So every time there's an item start registered, we now want to change this to the register item method. Now, don't replace all. We're going to replace all of them except for the very last one, because the very last one, or the very last two over here, because those two are actually for, well, registering the item and then registering the deferred register itself. So that would be not a good idea. Then every time there is an arrow over here, we're going to replace this with properties with the arrow. There you go. And replace. And I think we can just do this all around except for the very last one once more. There we go. And then finally, new item properties will be replaced with just properties in all lowercase. And we're going to just do this for all of them for the time being, except for, once again, the very last one right here. And then we can start from the top and work our way down. Because those don't have any properties, we can simply hover over this and replace that with item called new. Pretty neat over here. Then in the sword and the stuff, yes, they have decided that, you know what, creating these attributes, that's ridiculous. What we actually want to do is simply take the tool tier, say dot, and then take the tool tier, then the two values, and that's it. That's actually all we need. The tool tier, we actually also have to change in just a second. But yeah, that's what we need to do. So we need to take the two attributes that we have taken into the create attributes method, make a comma after the tool tier, and then pass those two in. So I basically just select this, Control X to cut it out, and then after here, comma, and then a Control V to paste it in, and then I delete the rest. Highly recommend it once more to check out the GitHub repository if there are any issues over here when it comes to the formatting or things like that. It can very easily happen to, you know, that you can make a mistake in here somewhere, basically leaving out a parentheses or something like that is super easy to do because there's like, this is a jungle of parentheses, basically. There you go. Then when it comes to the armor, a similar type of thing has happened, but not quite as drastic. The armor item type is now the armor type. So we can literally just replace all. And there we go, import the armor type method or rather class, and there you go. The horse armor has changed in that you no longer need a false, boop, and boop, and boopity boop. The Kaupen smithing template now simply needs the smithing template create something. Create a armor trim template. There you go. Easy enough. And the item name block item no longer exists. Those are now just normal block items because by default, if I recall correctly, they take on the name of the block. Of the item. So every single block, if we didn't specifically tell it, it would now be items.walnutlog or item.tutorial.walnutlog for its translation. However, because we call the use block description prefix, that is now also fixed, and that by default it is here. So there you go. Finally, mod tool tiers to fix these errors here as well. That now literally is just going to be a tool tier, tool material with a new tool material, and instead of this for the repair, we're going to have mod tags.items. Not transformable items, but rather the repairables. I guess this needs to be, oh my, this is actually completely wrong way around. The first parameter is now the incorrect tool, and then we have 1400. Oh my, I'm just going to copy this over. I think this is going to be easier. There you go. So incorrect tool, 1400, speed, attack bonus, enchantment, and then finally the repairable. So it changed up a little bit, but nothing too crazy. And then that is going to fix this issue as well. Continue along with the loot. I was actually not prepared that that's not going to work. Why would it not work? Because we now also have access to a loot table in the do-apply method. Yeah. I've not done anything with this, so I don't know if we need to or not. But yeah, that's the thing now, I guess. Particles should work without any issues. Potions should work, except the potion. The first parameter here is going to be a name, slimy_potion. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. The recipes have changed. Indeed, they have. First of all, the get ingredients is no longer an override. That's totally fine and easily done. Then down here, the question marks actually now extends from the recipe of type growth chamber recipe input. So we're going to have to do that on both of those, on both the get type and the get serializer. The codec non-empty is now simply called codec, so nothing too crazy. Can craft in dimensions and get result item are both gone, and for this we get two new methods. That's the get placement info and the recipe book category. Here you get the miscellaneous crafting recipe category, and then here we're just creating it for the input item. I don't think that this is going to work because in our screen we actually don't have the recipe book, so I don't think it makes any difference, but I just added this and we're gonna be fine. It's gonna be okay. Recipe input has nothing changed, and the recipes as well, nothing changed. The screen has changed a tiny bit, not in here, but in here. We no longer need these three system render calls, and when it comes to a blit call, what we now need to do is we need to tell it, number one, that this is a GUI texture, and number two, we need to give it the actual texture width and height over here. By default, this was always 256 by 256, and it was basically assumed that it was, but now we always have to explicitly tell it. The reason why we don't need to change it right here in the arrow is because we are already giving it, because obviously the arrow had a texture that was not 256 by 256, so we had to already specify this anyway. And the same thing goes here in the blit right here, the render type, : GUI textured, and then here, once again, 256 by 256 or whatever. I mean, yeah, if the size of your texture of the menu is different from 256 by 256, you'd have to add it anyway, so then you wouldn't need to change it. So there you go. There's no sound issues. However, there are trim issues, and the trim issues are literally just that it changed its location. So we're going to remove this, import it, and there you go. Similar thing here. Just remove this, re-import it, and both work again. Util item properties are still fine. Then we get to the villagers. They are still fine. World gen has not changed, luckily. And finally, in the tutorial mod, we are here. However, do you think we are done? No, we are not done, because we need to change things in the assets. And the things in the assets that change are as follows. Inside of tutorial mod models, we now get another directory called equipment. Inside of there, I'll copy over the JSON file. This is the alexandrite.json, which points to 3 different textures over here. one for the horse body, one for the humanoid, and one for the humanoid leggings. These textures are individually the horse armor texture, as well as the layer 1 and layer 2 for the armor models. Those now all go into textures, entity, and then here a new directory called equipment. And then the names of the individual folders are horse_body. There we go. Then humanoid. So we're going to literally just basically copy the names right here. And then finally, this is humanoid leggings. And this is going to be the horse armor Alexandrite. We're going to move this into here and rename it. So simply click on it, Shift F6 to rename it. And this is going to be Alexandrite. Alexandrite. Basically the same name as we have here. You could, of course, also change the name that you point towards here and then change the name right here. That is absolutely up to you. You could do that if you so choose to. I'm going to just call them all Alexandrite because that's basically how vanilla does it. And that's going to be okay. But there should be nothing stopping you from not doing that. We can then delete the horse. We can delete models armor. And that's almost everything, except not quite, because a similar thing has happened for the trims. So in the trims over here, so this is textures, trims, the models folder will rename to entity. And then inside of here, the armor one, we will rename to humanoid. There you go. And we'll make a new folder in the entity folder called humanoid leggings. That is obviously where the Kaupen leggings go. We'll rename both of them to Kaupen.png here in this case. So both of them are called Kaupen.png. The color palettes are fine. And of course, this also means that the armor trims right here have changed a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Basically, as you can see, we are now pointing to trims entity humanoid Kaupen and trims entity humanoid leggings Kaupen here, and down here to the color palette that we've already defined before. So this one hasn't changed here. I believe this should be all of the changes that we need for this particular version. I can't believe it. There we go. Let's first and foremost run data gen just to make sure. Oh, there actually is one more thing, but we're going to be doing that after the data gen has gone through. If we miss anything, that we will basically, we'll figure this out very quickly. That's the idea. But yes, there is one more thing to change, but nothing too crazy. Let's just let this run through and then we'll see. Awesome, 39 new written files. I believe those are, I don't even know exactly what they are, but it doesn't matter that much because what matters in our custom data folder in the recipes, we actually need to change the ingredients. They are no longer objects. We now want them to be sort of in lines. So they are now exactly this. So ingredient, tutorial mod raw Alexandrite, and then a comma. So this is now going to be a singular ingredient here in this case. And the same thing goes right here. So the coal right now is a singular ingredient. And then here, the end rod for the stick. Going to be this one right here. Just give it a sec. There you go. And then there you go. And there you go. That's going to be that. And that will also make sure that the recipes work properly. Awesome. With that done, let's go into running the client. Let's jump in the game and see if it works. All right, finally back in Minecraft, and let's take a look. So far, it seems pretty freaking good. So something about the radiation stuff does not work. I'm not quite sure what it is, but okay, that's fair enough. This works. That is pretty freaking neat. We can, of course, throw the tomahawk. However, yeah, it has some rotational issues. That's going to be okay. The hammer definitely still works. I actually tested this thoroughly because I thought that this was one of the coolest things to basically have. And then when it comes to anything else, I believe this doesn't, it's going to show up, but it's not going to work for the mod armor item. Yep, that's what I said. Basically, that no longer works, sadly. The bow over here still does its thing. And when it comes to all of the, different things over here, that's all still going to work. We got this one, absolutely awesome. We can still sit on the chair. We can get our pedestal to display something. And here, if you put in a stick over here, then we're going to see that this also still works. Absolutely phenomenal. And finally, of course, also a big one, Triceratops. Look at that. Let's go. And here we got some end rods. Absolutely amazing. You can still get that. Yeah, I think that is basically most of the stuff done. There might be one thing, and that is the see-throughness of the models right here. We will have to do that manually in the client, even though this is not, well, suggested, but let's just fix that. And then we have updated to 1.21.3. Nice. And basically what we want to do is set the render layer over here via the item block render types. The reason why we do that is because I am unable to understand how to do it via data gen right now. Because in theory, those have to be added via data gen. However, they're not added basically. There's no way to do it right now. So doing this manually over here will work. Yes, they are deprecated. Yes, they will be removed in 121.4. It is what it is. It's fine. We're just going to use this for the time being. If you really need it and if you really want to update and things like that, then those are some of the compromises that we'll simply have to do. But with that, that's going to be it for, well, the update to 1.21.3. If you are actually mad enough to stick through this entire video, congratulations. Feel free to comment Ace of Spades in the comments below if you actually made it through. It would be pretty freaking crazy. I do recommend if you actually want to update, that's totally fine. If you want to update going up, further from here to 1.21.4 and to 0.5 and maybe beyond, that's most likely where you're going to be left alone, at least by myself. I have tried to update to 1.21.4 and was unable to do so properly. There's no documentation on anything, basically, sadly, for Forge, and the NeoForge docs there sadly don't help. So that's kind of the end of the road, most likely, for the time being with Forge here. I'm hoping that maybe they can get something together, but I'm becoming more and more, I'm becoming more and more pessimistic when it comes to that. Regardless, that is going to be it. If you are really looking for 1.21.4 and above, I do recommend you can also change to NeoForge. It is very similar to Forge. There are obviously differences, but it is similar, and you will be able to acclimatize to it pretty easily, let's say. But that's going to be it for this tutorial right here. I don't know if it's going to be a next Forge tutorial. We'll have to wait and see. But for the time being, I still hope you found this useful and you learned something new. I'll see you all in the next tutorial. So, yeah.